McConnell with us. Ellen's bio was not in your program. We apologize for that, but let me tell you a little bit about Ellen. She is the Global Petrochemical Market Manager for Air Products and Chemicals Incorporated. She has 20 plus years of industrial experience in technical and marketing roles, has co-authored patents and publications on a wide range of topics. She has degrees in chemical engineering from MIT and from the University of Wisconsin. And today Ellen's going to talk to us about their large-scale CO2 capture demonstration project in Port Arthur, Texas. Ellen, glad you're with us.
Thanks. So thank you very much for letting us come and talk to you about our large-scale project. We're very excited about it. It is in operation, and I'll just start going through it with you, and we'll see how it goes. This is skip over that one. Thank you. So in 2010, we were selected to receive funding from the Department of Energy under the Industrial Carbon Capture and Sequestration Program. And that funding was for a CO2 capture equipment on a large-scale hydrogen production unit. So word about hydrogen. There's a number of different ways you can make hydrogen, lots of modes of supply, but today still the state of the art for large-scale, what we call tonnage hydrogen, is steam methane reforming. And so that hydrogen would be used in the case of an application like refining to take the sulfur out of the fuel so you can get ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel or low sulfur gasoline. The CO2 that's made, a good portion of that CO2 is what's called process CO2. It is inherent to the chemistry of the process. And that's the CO2 that we're targeting with this project. So what we did was we retrofitted 2 steam methane reformers that sit in the very middle of the Valero refinery in Port Arthur. And these 2, they're not adjacent to each other. They're actually probably almost a half mile apart. But they both are large scale, and they're embedded inside. They're what we call on-site models. They're embedded inside the refinery. So we capture the CO2, purify it, dry it, compress it, and then send it through about a 13-mile spar pipeline to Denbury's green pipeline. And then Denbury takes it from there down to the Hastings oil field for enhanced oil recovery. The technology we used was not the typical amine because we were doing a retrofit. And this particular system, when you retrofit, you don't get that nice blank sheet of paper where you can optimize everything, hydrogen, steam, power, you name it. You get what you get on the site that you have. And in this particular site, we did not have sufficient steam to do an amine unit. So we decided to scale up a technology that we had been working on called CO2 VSA, vacuum swing adsorption. And so this had been developed technology, but at small scale. So this particular project then scaled that up to full scale. We targeted 90% capture of the processed CO2, and that results in about 1 million tons a year. We do scuff per day, but 1 million tons a year of CO2 that went to enhanced oil recovery. We also needed about 30 megawatts of cogen because the VSAs and the compressor need a lot of power, as we heard about already, and we needed a little bit of makeup steam. And our partners for this were the Department of Energy, Valero, and Denbury Resources. So I'm an engineer, so you guys get to see a block diagram. And there's 2 reasons for this block diagram. 1, to explain it to you, and 2, to let you see that this isn't just sticking a CO2 capture unit at the end of a hydrogen plant. It's more complicated than that. So this block diagram is 2. There's Port Arthur 1 on the bottom, Port Arthur 2 on the top. And you'll see that there's the existing SMRs, and then we have the new VSAs, and there's just 1 compressor and dryer. Like I said, the 2 SMRs are reasonably far apart, so each one of them has their own VSAs, but then the CO2, the wet CO2, is just brought to the dryer and the compressor together. So the black lines is the existing stream before we did the CO2 project. So natural gas goes into the SMR, it is reformed, it's made into syngas. The syngas is then sent into the hydrogen production unit, or the hydrogen PSA, to purify it. And then that purified hydrogen, like 99+%, goes to the customer and also our pipeline. We also have co-product steam, co-product power that also goes to the host site, the host refinery. When we put in that CO2 VSA, we are disrupting that stream. We're no longer sending the syngas directly to the hydrogen PSA, we instead are taking it to the CO2 unit. So the syngas goes into the CO2 unit, it gets purified and then dried and sent into the compressor. The compressor then exports it out to the CO2 pipeline. The remaining syngas goes back into that hydrogen PSA, where it is then purified and the hydrogen is exported out. Now, that syngas is different looking than it was before because you took all the CO2 out. So that PSA has to be run a little differently. And then we have some modified streams because now the purge gas from that PSA that goes back into the SMR to maximize recovery is also different. So now your heat capacity inside your SMR has changed and how you run it is different. So those are things you have to design and work out ahead of time when you're doing a retrofit. Other things, and obviously utilities have changed as well because you have a whole lot of power that you need to run that massive compressor, and of course also VSAs. So what does this look like, an actual project? This is the project site. The existing SMR, it's obviously right here. If you look very carefully in the shadows, you can see the hydrogen PSAs. And that is your hydrogen producer, and it's also your CO2 producer. And then from there, we'll go through the VSA vessels and the blowers in the surge tank. This is all part of the VSA kit. And then the TSA unit, TG unit for the dryer, and the CO2 compressor. The first thing that most people notice, even if they're not an engineer, going here, is how much real estate you need for that CO2 capture relative to the CO2 emitter. And that is not a trivial thing, because if you're retrofitting and you have a plant that's older, and either things have been built around it, or simply it's old enough CO2 was not a glimmer in anyone's eye at that time. You may not have the real estate to do the CO2 capture. That might affect the technology you choose. It might affect if you even can retrofit it at all. The other important things for a retrofit to note is that you are usually constructing on an active operating site. We were running this hydrogen SMR all the way while we were constructing because the refinery still needs hydrogen. And the refinery was still running. And like I said, we had 2 sites in the middle of their big refinery. So scheduling is very important, and your safety protocols are very important. These are things that are key when you're doing a retrofit that, while obviously are also important for a greenfield, but have an elevated issue with a retrofit. So this is obviously built, and it is operating. We started up Port Arthur 2 December 2012. We started up Port Arthur 1 in March of 2013. And to date, we have captured more than 4 million tons of CO2 that have gone into enhanced oil recovery. Now we have one more slide, and that is to thank the DOE, because without their funding, this would not have happened. Thank you.